Hey there, fellow knowledge seeker. Buckle up because today we're diving into the life of one seriously enigmatic figure.
Aleister Crowley.
Right. You might know him as the wickedest man in the world.
A title he kind of leaned into.
He did, but between you and me, there's way more to this story than shock value. We're talking about a man who, even 77 years after his death, still has the power to fascinate, outrage, and spark endless debate.
He's a walking, talking paradox.
Yeah.
And in those contradictions, you find the real story.
Exactly. So we're doing more than just spitting out biographical bullet points today. We're using our sources.
Which are?
A Wikipedia article to ground us in the facts, and a fascinating deep dive into Crowley's influence on pop culture to understand why he still matters. Why do artists from the Beatles to comic book legend Alan Moore keep drawing inspiration from this guy? Was he a genius, a madman, or maybe a little of both?
Let's unpack it.
Let's unpack it, shall we?
The best place to start unpacking is usually at the beginning. And Crowley's beginning is surprisingly ordinary, at least on the surface. Born Edward Alexander Crowley in 1875, he came from a wealthy family.
Yep, privilege, a posh upbringing. But here's where it gets interesting. His parents were devout Christians.
Really?
Yeah, part of the super strict, exclusive brethren. You'd think that would set someone on a path to, not becoming the wickedest man in the world.
Sometimes it's the people who grow up surrounded by strict dogma who end up questioning it most fiercely. Crowley's rebellion was practically written in the stars.
Talk about foreshadowing. By his teens, he was already rejecting Christianity, diving headfirst into the occult.
No surprise there.
But hold on, because even his early years are a study in contrasts. This is a guy who was a chess prodigy, we're talking next-level strategist, but also a thrill-seeking mountaineer. He published poetry while simultaneously, shall we say, engaging in activities that wouldn't exactly make his parents proud.
That duality is key to understanding Crowley. It speaks to a restless intellect, a constant need to push boundaries intellectually, spiritually, even physically.
He couldn't sit still, could he?
It's almost as if he couldn't stand to be confined by any one label or expectation.
And that makes me think about something his biographers often point out, a pivotal moment when he was just 11 years old. His father died. It's a classic trope in the lives of extraordinary individuals, isn't it? That early loss, that disruption of the expected order, it often sets the stage for a hero's journey.
Even if it's a very unconventional one.
Exactly. And speaking of unconventional, let's talk about names. From a young age, Crowley was obsessed with aliases, with reinventing himself.
Oh.
He even rejected his given name, Edward, calling it the name of a hated teacher. This desire to craft his own identity, to transcend the limitations placed upon him, it's a thread that runs through his entire life.
And it leads us right to his time at Cambridge.
Which wasn't just about hitting the books. This is where Crowley really started exploring those occult interests we talked about. Sure, he was president of the chess club, always the strategist.
Once a chess player.
Right. But he was also devouring what some might call questionable literature. Shelley, Burton, the works. Stuff that challenged societal norms and whispered of hidden worlds.
It's fascinating to consider the intellectual ferment of Cambridge at the time.
It really was buzzing.
This wasn't just rote learning. It was a place where brilliant minds grappled with big ideas, questioning everything.
And Crowley was right there in the thick of it.
Soaking it all up.
Absolutely. Speaking of questioning everything, let's talk about the Golden Dawn.
Ah, the Golden Dawn.
Now, this wasn't your average meditation group.
Not even close.
Think more secret society, steeped in ritual magic and esoteric knowledge.
Crowley's kind of scene.
Totally.
Yeah.
But even then, Crowley's reputation preceded him. He was already making waves, ruffling feathers, and generally refusing to play by the rules. There were feuds, rivalries, even a dramatic attempted break-in at their temple.
He was always pushing the limits.
Always. And you know what this whole Golden Dawn episode reveals? A recurring pattern in Crowley's life, a cycle of rapid mastery, followed by disillusionment and a break to forge his own path. He absorbed knowledge like a sponge, but he wasn't content to be a follower. Crowley always had to push further, to innovate, to challenge the status quo.
And forge his own path he did.
Uh-huh.
But Cairo in 1904, that's where things go from interesting Crowley to, wait, what just happened? Crowley?
Cairo in 1904 was a crucible for him, no doubt about it. He and his wife, already a scandalous pairing by the standards of the time.
Tell me more.
They were deep into Egyptian magic, experimenting with rituals and pushing the boundaries of consciousness. It's like they were stepping right into the pages of a Rider Haggard novel, only with real magic.
Okay, real magic is debatable. But you're right, the setting was straight out of an adventure story, but this is where it gets really wild.
This is where the plot twists. Crowley claims that a being named Iwes, and we'll get into the whole who or what was Iwes debate another time, dictated a text to him.
A text.
A text that would become the foundation of his new religion, Thelema, the Book of the Law. Dun dun dun.
It's important to remember the historical context here.
Yeah.
1904, the dawn of the 20th century. The world was on the brink of massive change.
Tech, social upheaval, anxieties about the future.
And into this atmosphere of uncertainty bursts Crowley, proclaiming a new law for a new age.
And this new law is, well, it's intense. It's about personal liberation, tapping into your true will.
Your true will.
And achieving a state of being Crowley called magic. But the phrase that really gets people fired up even today is, do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. On the surface, it sounds like hedonism 101, right?
Right.
Which is what makes Crowley so endlessly fascinating. People latch onto that phrase, but they often miss the nuance. Crowley wasn't advocating for a free-for-all of indulgence. He believed that true will wasn't about fleeting desires, but about aligning yourself with your deepest purpose, your cosmic destiny. And that's not always easy or pretty. It requires self-discipline, self-knowledge, and a willingness to confront the shadows within yourself.
So basically, Crowley was saying, figure out who you truly are, why you're here, and then live that truth unapologetically, even if it makes people uncomfortable. Which, let's be real, his life did in spades.
Which is where the whole wickedest man in the world label comes in.
Right, because it's a lot easier to dismiss someone as evil than to actually grapple with the challenging questions they raise.
Is way easier.
And Crowley, never one to shy away from controversy, seemed to revel in that villainous image.
Oh, absolutely. He understood the power of symbolism, of pushing buttons.
And the media, eager for a good story, they ate it up.
Hook, line, and sinker. The Abbey of Thelema, for example.
Talk about a public relations nightmare.
Yeah. Crowley envisioned it as this utopian community where people could live according to Thelemic principles. But in reality, it became notorious for drug use, unconventional sexual practices, and basically everything that horrified proper British society.
The Abbey was a microcosm of Crowley's own contradictions, a noble aspiration that crashed headlong into his own excesses and the very real dangers of pushing boundaries without, perhaps, enough self-awareness.
Which, to be fair, was kind of his thing. This is a man who nearly died climbing K2, explored remote regions of China, and founded a secretive magical order that aimed to, carry on the traditions of groups like the Golden Dawn, but with, a bit more Crowley flair.
Of course.
He was constantly pushing limits, testing himself, testing the universe.
That's what's so compelling about him. He was larger than life in many ways. And that's reflected in his enduring influence on pop culture.
I was just thinking that. Think about it. The Beatles featured him on the cover of Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band.
Led Zeppelin's Jimmy Page was a collector of Crowley's writings. Even Ozzy Osbourne dedicated a song to him.
It's true. Crowley seems to pop up everywhere, from music to movies to comic books. He's this touchstone for artists exploring themes of rebellion, transgression, and the darker side of spirituality. But it's not just pop culture where Crowley's influence is being felt.
What do you mean?
Scholars are starting to take his ideas seriously, too. There's a growing body of academic work that examines Thelema, its philosophical underpinnings, and its place in the broader context of Western esotericism.
It's like we've been saying all along. So much to unpack with Crowley.
Right. And you know what's wild? We've got these two different lenses on him today.
How so?
Well, we have the biographical details from Wikipedia, which are like the scaffolding of his life, and then this deep dive into his impact on culture, which is like seeing the man himself and the myth he created.
It's that interplay that makes him so fascinating. You have Crowley the man, flawed, excessive, brilliant, a total knot of contradictions. And then you have Crowley the icon, the symbol of rebellion and esoteric exploration, who artists and thinkers are still captivated by.
And it's not just artists, right? We talked about scholars revisiting his work, but it's even bigger than that. I mean, here we are, almost a century after his death, still debating his legacy.
It's true.
Did he tap into some timeless truth about human nature, about our need to question and explore the unknown? Or was he simply a product of his time, a master self-promoter who knew how to grab attention in a world on the verge of massive change?
Those are the questions that keep people coming back to Crowley, aren't they? He challenges us to confront our own beliefs about morality, spirituality, and what it means to live a truly authentic life. Even if his answers make us uncomfortable, even if we reject his methods, he forces us to ask ourselves those tough questions in the first place.
Maybe that's his legacy. Maybe the most important thing Crowley left behind wasn't a set of doctrines or rituals, but a challenge to question everything, to break free from the constraints of convention and to discover our own unique paths.
That's a powerful legacy, and it's one that I suspect will continue to intrigue, provoke, and inspire for generations to come.
I think you're right. So, what do you think? What aspects of Crowley's life and work resonate most with you? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Head over to our social media and join the conversation because when it comes to Aleister Crowley, there's always more to discuss. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and as always, happy diving.